breathing air recycled 1,000,000 times over. I see a humanity too weak to turn back the madness. This is where I belong. This is my home. My territory. Where the bullet and the knife are kings. Life is cheap. Especially yours. Welcome to the Underhive.
Right, hello guys. Now, I had said to myself that I wasn't going to make any other videos until I finished the Inquisition Part 2, which I am working on. And as I literally just posted right now onto the YouTube community tab here on the channel, I also said how I didn't want to talk about the Domitus box set until next week, when I can kind of get into it a bit more, make a proper video about it that will be interesting, because I've got some other things that are coming that I want to add to that and talk about how it's going to work in the army and what's going to happen with the Necron stuff, and there's some lore things there as well. However, right now, Necromunda Underhive Wars has some actual information, because for the longest time they've just been posting images and vaguely talking about stuff, and people have been saying like, oh, you know, there's some new things here, but no, there's not really been any new information particularly about this game. And a lot of people were like, is it ever going to be a thing? What's happening? Because it kind of went off the radar. And I will just remind that although we haven't really seen any proper gameplay, they did show it at E3 in 2018, so there was people getting some early access kind of looks at it there. So it is definitely a thing which had gameplay, but they obviously have been refining it and working through it. Now, if you don't know what Necromunda is, it's basically hive wars. So in a hive city, you have the undesirables, gang members that live in the very lowest level of a hive. Now, I've wanted to do a video about hive cities, and I'm going to get to that because that's probably coming up soon, because I want to kind of connect it to it. I really want to get into Necromunda, and not maybe even specifically Necromunda, but obviously I've got the Luton Necropolis. That's my kind of fan fictional thing based on a real planet in the lore, and I wanted to make my own gangs because I've got some rat skins that would be really cool to go in there. But anyway, they've posted some actual information about what this game is going to be, Necromunda Underhive Wars, and I've been really interested to know whether this game is going to be any good or not, because as we know, 40k games can be a little bit hit and miss, and I really wanted this one to be good. I will say though, often these kind of strategy-ish games can be a little bit more like something akin to a translated tabletop. Now, personally speaking, I think that's fine. I'm actually fine with that because I already like the tabletop games, but some people don't like that feel. They don't like having kind of just a tabletop game translated into a sort of a video game. They want more than that. They want to be able to move around in not basically a turn-based sort of strategy way, right? I always felt like this game was probably going to be a more literal translation of the tabletop game, but kind of animated. For me, that's really exciting. That's kind of what I want to see. That's why I really enjoy kind of like the Space Hulk series, because it's basically like a translation. But like I say, it's not for everybody. So let's just dive in. All I'm going to do today is I'm just going to go through this. Let's just going to go through, read the information and look at what this is. And at the end of it, we'll just have a little think about what it's going to be. But I will say just from the outset, obviously, until you have the game and we have some gameplay and we know what it feels like, what it actually plays like, and so on and so on, then it's going to be difficult to really give a proper opinion. But I am pretty optimistic from what I have kind of gone through and looked at here, so you know, let's have a read. So to begin with, they just kind of overview, yeah, okay, we're talking about this today. Straight away, I love this image here, classic Mechanicus style skull underhive. Reminds me very much of kind of like dwarf forges, really, maybe something from like World of Warcraft. So answer the call. Before testing your metal in Necromunda Underhive Wars, multiple game modes, which they're going to cover, the first thing you need to do is create your gang, which is going to belong to one of the planet's infamous great houses. So apparently no custom gangs straight away. At launch, players will be able to choose from Escher, Goliath and Orlok, each of which will come with their own flavour, special perks, bonus stats. Many of the skills your fighters will use in battle will also have special variants depending on the house your gang belongs to. Can I make this bigger? No, unless we do this. The perk, Hardened Brute, AP cost of equipped weapon for each enemy engaged with user defensive, plus 10% hit resistance. Can't read this. Something disengaged, something out of action. Bonus stats, 6 toughness. So basically they're just getting sort of factional perks related to what they are. So, you know, Goliath are always going to be those kind of slightly tougher ones. Escher, more nimble with they're sort of pumped full of chems and drugs. And then you've got Orlok, which are basically ore miners. So assemble your crew. You'll want to assemble and customize an active crew up to 5 fighters in order to represent a force capable of facing the multiple dangers of the Underhive. Each fighter will fill a specific battlefield role, first determined by its chosen career. So Deadeye, Brawler, Heavy, Saboteur or Lay Mechanic. A little concerned that it's an active crew of 5 fighters. That means there's only going to be 5v5 sort of in the battlefield. Not sure I'm so happy about that. I was hoping it would be at least 10. Each gang will be able to recruit up to a total of 15 fighters at once, with 10 held in reserve, so that's obviously better, but in case active fighters get injured or to create different character combinations and synergies depending on the situation, players will be able to freely rotate fighters between each mission, so seemingly not in-game. So that does mean they're going to be limited to 5. Not sure I'm super happy about that because I was hoping it would be more. Each of the 5 different careers will grant fighters a unique signature skill as well as a special career perk and bonuses to certain stats. In terms of fighting capabilities, all fighters will be able to learn and use a great number of general skills, but many abilities will also be exclusive to certain career paths. Your gang will also need a leader, a fighter of any career who has reached or been recruited at higher experience level. Leaders will have access to special selection of heroic and order skills, extremely powerful but limited, abilities meant to inspire their allies and tip scales of battle in tense combat situations. Again, I feel not incredibly happy about it being limited to 5, but until we kind of see the scale of the actual combat and the sort of pace and the variety and the way it plays out, I'm going to reserve judgment until we see things a little bit further down the line. Load up before jumping into battle. You also want to make sure all your fighters have the best possible loadout, which includes stats, skills and equipment. Stats are used to represent and measure a fighter's attributes and proficiency. Stats are separated into 2 main categories, primary and secondary. Primary stats are the ones you'll be able to upgrade whenever a fighter ranks up. Each of these will directly affect 2 of these 18 secondary stats, which will be used and modified by skills, equipment and other factors such as injuries in combat. So that's pretty good because they have got skills and elements related, which is, you know, fairly similar to the game in terms of what you'll be doing. Skills come in 2 main categories: passive, which will automatically trigger with certain conditions, active, which need to be manually performed. Depending on their level, each fighter will be able to learn, upgrade and use a loadout of up to 5 active and 5 passive skills at once. Successful players will make sure to create synergies across the abilities of multiple fighters in order to access or in order to increase the effectiveness of each individual unit and the gang as a whole. So again, we really need to see some proper gameplay and understand more about this, but it sounds of course like you're trying to kind of create a fairly customized squad that will work to maximize their potential in certain aspects, and maybe this will depend on what your mission is and who you're facing and so on and so on. So then equipment will also play an important role in NECROMUNDA UNDERHIVE, with each fighter being able to equip various weapons, armor and consumable items of both tactical and offensive, as well as implants and bionics. That's quite good because that's obviously quite a range of things there. While some equipment pieces will be restricted to certain careers, a majority will be able to be used by any fighter, from dual-wielding las pistols to devastating heavy bolters, iconic close-quarter chainswords. The choice of how you want to build and specialize each of your fighters will be entirely yours. Of course, you'll be able to apply extensive cosmetic customization to your gang and fighters. We'll cover this in its own upcoming dedicated blog post. Okay, so then to battle, quite a nice looking environment. Once your crew is ready, you'll be able to select from multiple online and offline game modes in order to face off against rival gangs in the Underhive. Whilst there are many mechanics and tactics that will be important for you to master in order to be successful, let's review the basics. So, okay, here we go. Rounds and turns. NECROMUNDA UNDERHIVE Wars is a turn-based strategy game, but with a twist. Each battle will be split into a number of rounds, during which each of the participating fighters will get their own turn to act. At the beginning of each round, every gang will be able to select one fighter to put into action. The initiative stat of each of those chosen characters will then be compared to determine the order in which they take their turn within the round. Again, this looks like a kind of live actual gameplay shot, which looks really nice. It looks very Underhive, very dark. Moving and performing actions, knowing how to maneuver through the battlefield and how to use all the tools at your disposal is half the battle. In combat scenarios, performing most skills will require action points, so it's an action point thing. This is kind of similar to Space Hulk, which each metered move will require a fighter to spend 1 movement point. Yeah, so it's very Space Hulky. movement points will only be spent when either ending a turn, using a skill, or suffering the effects of one, such as triggering a trap or receiving damage, meaning that you will normally be free to move your fighters in real time before committing to a move. It says the battlefields upon which your forces will wage combat are humongous places, desolate and covered in wreckage from times long forgotten. All these locations are very different from one another. They all have one thing in common, which is verticality, from makeshift bridges, zip lines, winding pipe works and disused cargo. Elevators, you have to make the most of all three dimensions in order to survive the brutal fights that await your gang. Now this is kind of interesting because they're talking about only teams of 5, if I've understood that properly, if maybe I'm wrong, but if they have teams of 5 at one time, then having a large scale battlefield with all kinds of verticality, it's going to make it kind of interesting. I really need to see kind of just how that plays out in real terms though, to be able to assess that. On top of letting your fighters traverse the terrain more efficiently, making use of verticality is also used for gaining height advantages, which provide your forces with accuracy bonuses when targeting less elevated enemies with ranged weaponry. So that's quite good, potentially good. That's going to be relevant depending on what your objective is. Maybe you have to cap something or secure something below, but the team above have an advantage in defending it. You know, there's all sorts of ways in which that could play out. Again, really need to see, in a more realistic kind of objective way how that works. So using verticality, terrain and cover to your advantage. In Necromunda Underhive, cover is dynamic and based on the percentage of a target's body that is visible by attackers. That's quite good because this is very similar to how actual Necromunda works in terms of cover. Kneeling behind crates, concealing oneself around tall objects or getting to higher floors will make combatants harder to hit. The opposite, getting caught off guard in open ground, will most likely be an open invitation for a very carefully placed and fatal bolter to the head. While most default attacks will always target random body parts, some offensive skills such as aimed shot pictured below will also allow fighters to aim at a specific body part in exchange for a higher AP cost to the skill, a prime occasion to focus attacks on unarmored locations or body parts clad in armor pieces that are weak to a weapon's particular damage type. Okay, that's interesting, and this is obviously, it looks very reminiscent of Fallout, where you obviously have that targeting system there, but that's very interesting that you can be that specific in terms of targeting. One thing I haven't seen mentioned, and I wonder whether they're going to get to it or talk about it later, in Necromunda you often basically have ammunition, so you need to make an ammo check dependent on what your weapon is. So something like a las gun, las pistol is going to be much more common in terms of ammunition than a bolter, which is going to be quite rare for the Underhive, because of course, whilst Imperials and the Space Marines are going to use bolters all the time, if you're in an Underhive, that's a very, very rare weapon to have, and so it's going to be hard to find ammunition for it, and so maybe you only are able to use it a few times. So I'm curious whether that's going to be a thing here. Tactical tools at your fingertips. While it may be easy to become disorientated inside the Underhive, fear not, Necromunda Underhive will provide you with a host of powerful, user-friendly tools to get your bearings and maintain your battlefield awareness. Special views, toggles such as tactical overlay and strategy view 3D picture below, extremely useful to plan strategies, allowing players to visualize the location of fighters' objectives, interactable objects, extraction zones, and other objects of interest. Now I think what's interesting is that right here you clearly have 4 gangs. Okay, so it seems to me that obviously you've got a variety of different gangs operating in the space. So although the level is relatively large, if you were to just have 2 teams of 5, it seems like you're actually having more than one team, which goes to explain why you're only having 5. However, I would say if you can do that, I mean, is it you always capped at 4? I don't know. But seeing how many fighters are clearly here in this space, you would hope that if you're going for basically 4-on-4 and you're having 5 fighters each, you would think that if you were doing a 1-on-1 battle, you could up that to sort of 10 or more units, so you're having like all-out battles. And I'll just note at the end here, this is a game which I haven't had my eye 100% on, because I've been basically waiting for a post like this where they drill down into a lot more detail. So maybe some things here I have missed that they have spoken about at odd times. So if any of you guys have extra information that's already been clarified, feel free to put that down in the comments. They just finish up by saying thank you. This concludes our first entry into the dev blog series. Yeah, see, this is why I think they actually haven't spoken too much about this stuff before. Although we've only scratched the surface the game has to offer, we sincerely hope you've enjoyed this first foray into Necromunda Underhive Wars. Plenty more to come in the future, starting with a first look at the different game modes the title will have to offer at launch later this summer, which is basically now because it's already July. In the meantime, don't hesitate, they've got Discord, Twitter and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. I wish that you were able to have more than 5 fighters. There's a few kind of questions about how the game is going to work. Basically seems like what I thought it was going to be, which is sort of akin to Space Hulk-ish, but with kind of Necromunda over the top of it, because that's how those tabletop games work. So this is exactly what I expected this game was going to be. I am really liking this little mechanic here though, this little sort of animation where you can see a character kind of moving up to an upper level. So it's cool that it has this kind of verticality in there. I like the overall design. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how well you can use cover systems, how well you can use the space. So there is loads of questions still to ask about this, but I thought this would be an interesting little thing to look at today, guys, because obviously there hasn't been a lot spoken about this game, and I'm really interested in it. I really wanted this to be a successful game because, you know, I love this kind of environment. I love the background and the lore of Necromunda. There's all sorts of stuff that comes with that. So I really wanted this game to be quite fleshed out in terms of detail. I'm not entirely sure how much that is going to be the case, but, you know, as you see more and more these days, some games which start out relatively unpromising can get patched and updated over time with all sorts of stuff. So, you know, if it has a good foundation to it, then hopefully that's something which can be built upon. So I'm remaining relatively optimistic about this. I want to see more gameplay. The one thing I'm not too happy about, like I say, is the sort of 5 limit to your squad. I wish that was more, but again, you know, maybe we'll hear from the devs about that. Maybe there's some scope there for more expansion with these things in the future. But as for now, tell me your thoughts down below. If you want me to keep you updated with this as the game development goes on, you want me to do these little dev blog overviews, happy to do that in the future. I just thought I'd put this out today because, like I say, nothing has been said too much about this game for a while, and I thought it would be good to take a little look. So that's my thoughts about this, guys. Tell me yours down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.